Good morning. I would like this morning to look at what constitutes a sin against the Spirit. Now below I've put an excerpt from Ellicott's commentary, and he very wisely says that we don't have the authority to say exactly what that sin is or who has committed it. But because we are so close to the end of the world, we want to stay as far away from these sins as possible. So we'll have a quick look at it. Now, first of all, a little while ago, someone posted a comment to say that she had left Watchtower, not because of the changes that they'd made, but because of this. See what you think.
However, the list of treatment options continues to grow. Therefore, after much prayer and consideration of the Scriptures, the governing body has decided to clarify our position.
Now, I could post quite a few of these instances where the governing body says the governing body has decided, but it's Jesus who decides. But here's a different example. Now, Ken Flodin was discussing Matthew 11 about taking on the yoke of Jesus Christ, and he explained that Jesus is lowly in heart and will find rest for our souls. But as for taking Jesus' yoke upon us, that of course means submitting to Jesus' rules, which is fine, we're happy with that. How he got from that to this, I don't know, but I find this worse than anything. See what you think.
Farmers often trained their oxen to respond to verbal commands so that they could keep their hands on the plow and not have to deal with the reins and the plow. The governing body could be likened to the voice of Jesus, the head of the congregation. So when we willingly submit to the faithful slave, we're ultimately submitting to Jesus' authority and direction.
None of us is the voice of Jesus Christ. This is the voice of Jesus Christ. Ken Flodin wants us to submit to him, of course, which is why they want to be the voice of Jesus. So, let me look at Matthew chapter 12, and this chapter is most interesting, and there's something really serious, very profound going on here. Jesus cures a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. Now, people also watched Jesus cure a man who was possessed by a demon, and the man wasn't able to speak or to see, but afterwards he could. So people were saying, can this be the son of David? Now, the scribes and Pharisees were there, and this was the most wonderful opportunity for them to say to the people, yes, this is the Messiah, follow him. And then the Jews would have made up the kingdom of heaven. There wouldn't have been any problem. But look at the enormity of what happened here. What they said to discredit Jesus was, this man casts out demons by means of Beelzebub. Jesus says quite a lot about this, but at the end he said, I tell you, every sin and blasphemy will be forgiven people, but blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. Whoever speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in this age or the age to come. So it appears here that the Pharisees had seen the wonderful effects of God's Spirit and what it could do. It could heal, it can do anything. And yet they attributed it to an evil source. Now, Jesus doesn't specifically say that they have committed a sin against the Spirit, but the implication is there, and they have to be really careful from now on that they don't imply that God's Spirit is evil. A dreadful thing to say. So, I'm not going to say what is or who has committed a sin against the Spirit, but we want to stay away from that as much as possible. Now, I've left a link below to some of the awful things going on in the world today, and we're very near the end. So we're going to need a huge amount of faith. As Jesus said, when you pray to God, believe that you will get an answer. As it says in James, when you pray, do not pray in doubt. You pray with the great faith that God will answer your prayers. Don't doubt. Ask for what you need in the assurance that you will get it. So how do we build up this faith? Well, we can look at nature, we can look at everything that God has created, because his great qualities, his power, his enormous wisdom, his knowledge can be seen in creation. But also we think of the miracles that Jesus performed, because God can do anything. We're going to need to remember that as we get near the end. So here's a few little things to start you thinking about God's greatness and his loving kindness towards us. And we will accept Jesus' voice exactly from the scriptures and nowhere else. Thank you so much, and God be with you.